it's time to answer your questions. There is quite a bunch, and I'll try to answer them all now. Okay, so let me grab my laptop and read the first question. What projects are you involved in currently? Basically, what do you code? Well, nowadays I mostly code at work. And while I cannot say exactly what I work on, it's still related to robotics and computer vision and a lot of C++, which involves a lot of things. It involves making decisions on the research level of what to pursue and what not to pursue, as well as how to design the system so that it not only works well, but also runs quickly. How do you learn new things in CPP, and how do you advance your coding skills to become an expert or super advanced? First of all, I don't think that I'm a huge expert in this. There are a lot of people in the world who know C++ and system design much better than I do. But what I think I don't completely suck at is at explaining things in an easy way, or getting complex things much easier and having clear interfaces to those, which are very related things in my books. So while I cannot tell you how to become an expert, the way that worked for me is I was just always interested in designing systems. And the main reason for being interested in designing systems is I don't want to redesign them afterwards, which is a very complicated topic. So what I wanted to kind of always have is I wanted to design the system once, write the code once, and then whatever changes come in, they should already be anticipated in this design so that I don't have to redesign this. That's kind of how it worked out until now, and with time I found more and more mistakes that I made, and now I hope I make less. Okay, next. What tools do you use for coding and extensions in VS Code? Well, probably VS Code. The tools that I use for coding, I mostly nowadays live in VS Code, which pains me to say, but before I was completely on Sublime Text, and I even wrote this plugin for Sublime Text autocompletion, which I think a lot of people still use. But because I have to work through SSH a lot in my work now, I needed a better tool for this. And VS Code is great at this. Now that we also have a language service protocol? LSP? Don't know, I will write it on the screen the correct way. So we now have LSP, and because we have LSP, we basically have language support from Clang, so I can also have my autocompletion in C++. I use the ClangD plugin for that. And apart from this, I'm not really using that many, apart from some color schemes. Oh, you're right, I use MARP for generating the slides that you've seen in the course before. I'll of course leave the links to all of those below. Have you thought about live coding, streaming via Twitch one day, in doing some project? I thought about this, but I don't think it's my cup of tea. I'm not a quick thinker. I also don't work quickly. I hope that I work efficiently, so I'm not sure if anybody will be interested in me failing on screen for a significant amount of time. You can comment below if this is not the case. I'm not promising that I will do it anyway. Have you worked on designing simulations from scratch for mobile robots in order to test SLAM trajectory generation algorithms? I'm aware of open source softwares like Gazebo, but as a student, do you have any pointers for doing this on my own? I did touch Gazebo before. I also touched other things like Carla in the past, which are all amazing tools. But I agree with you, and I do see the value of doing things on your own, because then you really understand how it all works. It's actually very related to having tests running in your pipeline. So for something kind of trivial, like you can always devise a test that will test the system that you want. So it's kind of, you can easily write the unit tests and you can easily write the integration tests. And these you can totally write on your own. When you're getting to testing the whole system, you will probably want to use a package of some kind. But that being said, to write a rudimentary package to test things like this, let's say if you want to test your algorithm for SLAM, you can easily generate an algorithm that basically does some form of simple ray tracing. And it's a loud word, but what you mean is you break down your environment into a grid, and you shoot a beam, you follow this beam over the grids, and when it hits something, you return that distance. From that point on, you can already start doing something and kind of validating your algorithms. It's not going to be a good system at first, but I always treat it as an iterative problem, and at some point it will get better. How design patterns change the way you use the language? What was your experience? Were they detectable in the projects that you have worked on? And finally, do you have any plan on teaching at least most famous used patterns in C++? So I'll start from the end of this question. Definitely. There's definitely going to be some patterns in this C++ course. And the reason is the answer to the first part of this question. Yes, I have seen them in many projects. They did change the way I code eventually. And they have value. The main value I would say that they have is that it's much easier to communicate with other people. If you want to say that something generates other objects, you call it a factory and everybody knows what you mean, so you don't have to explain for half an hour what is it that you meant by the last sentence. So it does help. Also from the design perspective, just when you design your system, there is a bunch of tried approaches here and there that you can just kind of use off the shelf, and you know, like, well, in this situation, I should go for this. The trick is how to detect that you're in this situation, because every situation is slightly ever so different from the previous one. So there is still experience involved in this, but it does make your life a bit easier. That being said, to a lot of patterns I came on my own accord, so I've just been trying a bunch of things and been failing at them miserably and eventually learning more and more stuff that I can do better. And then at some point I read a book, I think it was The Gang of Four, so the main book about patterns, and then some more. I will try to remember them and put them in the description. But then when you read about what you've done before and you see, oh, okay, so that's why I failed and this is how to do it the right way. It always helps to build on top of your own mistakes. I don't think you can shortcut this. Hi, sir. First of all, don't call me sir. I feel old. Let's be on the first name basis, so if you need to address me directly, just call me Igor. Anyway, let's continue. First of all, your lectures are amazing. Thank you. Is there any plan to create a new course for us to learn about practical CUDA or practical SIMD intrinsics? Not really. I mean, not at the first time. The reasons for this is that while I did do some SIMD programming before, sometimes it is needed, rarely, but sometimes it's needed. I am not an expert at CUDA. I would also need to learn that on my own, and if I just learn it like now, I don't feel comfortable teaching this because I just won't know it well enough. So unfortunately, you will probably have to look for this elsewhere. We will touch some multi-threaded performance, and I think the general principles are still going to be the same. Maybe we will touch some OpenGL implementations, which is again something kind of similar. So we're going to touch similar things, but not exactly CUDA. Okay, how specifically did you use C++ in robotics? Using which frameworks to do what specifically? Whoa, okay. This is a huge question and I won't answer it fully because I've been using C++ for robotics for the last 10 years or so, and there's been a lot of projects that I've done and contributed to. The most notable ones that I can speak of were, of course, when I was involved, when I was working for Apex AI, and at Apex AI they are doing a fork of ROS2, which is well written and safety certified. And what I had to do was to do algorithms on top of that. And I was actively contributing to Auto project, which is this open source stack for a self-driving car. And there's a lot of my code still living there. I'm not sure it's very used nowadays, but it definitely lives in there. So that's probably the biggest contribution. And as for the other projects that I worked on, they ranged, like they were mostly in self-driving car domain, so I worked both in perception and in mapping and localization. I've never really touched planning or control, so I'm not on that side. I'm mostly on perception and planning and localization. And that's kind of what I do still, but now in a different domain. Then, of course, there is a bunch of libraries that I cannot avoid mentioning. If there is this library Eigen for linear algebra. If it wouldn't exist, I would have a much harder time in my life. Then for anything vision related, there is OpenCV and OpenGV libraries, and nowadays Open3D, which are all, they have their own quirks, but they are decently written libraries with many years of being used in the industry all over the place, so you can easily use those. Hi from Russia, your lectures are perfect. Can you talk about your way from Ukraine to Switzerland? I really want to hear it to correct my future actions. Now I'm studying for master's degrees in computer science. First of all, I don't want to go there, but feel the room with the opening part of this question. So I will answer part of it, but I answered the second one in the comments. The way from Ukraine to Switzerland was through education. I studied in Ukraine, I studied math, applied math, and at some point I felt like it was a bit too much math for me. And I decided that I want to switch and I want to see how it works in other parts of the world. So I ended up applying to a couple of German universities and get into an applied computer science program, where I started doing robotics with my professor Cyril Stocknis. By the way, go check out his channel, it's amazing. I'll leave a link and maybe also leave it on the screen somewhere. And then everything else is history. So apparently he liked working with me, I liked working with him, and I got to be a PhD student in his lab. And then there was a lot of work. I was really excited about what I was doing, so that's how I put a lot of work into all of this. And apparently I became decent in what I was doing. So the rest was just having a bunch of friends in different companies and applying to those companies and doing interesting stuff and always learning the next thing. So that's how I got to where I am right now. Overall, you need to put a lot of time into what you're doing to get good, and then you have to get lucky and grab that opportunity. Thanks for the great work. How to learn about memory management in C++. Keep watching this course. Generally, I want to structure this course with the basic first. That's where we are still right now. Then we go into more design questions on how to design software from a more high level now that we know all the basics. And then eventually we will go for in-depth concepts. Which is where we will be talking about memory management. It's not all that hard, and I hope that we can cover it pretty well in this course. So keep on watching, I guess. What do you think about ChatGPT in C++ development? Given that C++ projects are harder to maintain, have you found ChatGPT autocomplete will be nicer for us C++ developers? Wow, okay, this is a great question. I mean, it's on my mind a lot nowadays. As an anecdote, recently I asked ChatGPT to write a Velodyne driver from scratch, and it did. And I didn't try to compile it, but it looks like it will compile. It even knows the offsets in memory for particular bits of information in the Velodyne message. So pretty amazing stuff. That being said, ChatGPT is a language model, so it can be wrong, and it can, like, when it's wrong, it's very subtly wrong. So you have to really know what you're asking about to understand that something is missing there. If you don't know anything about the topic, like if you want to learn a new language or a new concept, it might be a good starting point to just ask it to hey, like, write this simple program, but then you will have to put in the work and understand, was it wrong somewhere or not, but it gives you a good starting point. So I think as an autocomplete, it might actually work really well, but it still needs to fix the problem of being wrong at sometimes. And this is a hard problem to fix because, as far as I know, it's a deep learning model, and with deep learning, it's always an issue of how do I explain what the deep learning model does, because essentially it's a black box. What do you like to do outside of coding? Have you ever done any other jobs? I played guitar some time ago. I don't have much time for it anymore because of partially this course over here, which takes most of my free time apart from work nowadays. I bike a lot. I really am into biking. I have my gravel bike and I like touring Switzerland nowadays. Before, like, wherever I would live, I would go on tours multiple 100 kilometers over a couple of days, and I enjoy doing that a lot. Generally, doing sports. I've been doing CrossFit before. I'm basically into anything that people suggest me doing, and if you have something that is hard and fun, feel free to leave a comment about this below, and I'll probably eventually get to try it. So overall, it's mostly not coding related. Oh yeah, apart from all the hobby projects that I had, but you can just go to my GitHub and check those out. Yeah, so it's a lot of things, but I guess like nothing too spectacular. And as for other jobs, I don't fully understand the question. I think you mean anything apart from doing programming, and the answer to that is no. My first job was when I was about 18 or 19 years old, I don't remember anymore. and that was already a programming job. I was very bad at it, but that's how you start. You start somewhere, you learn, and eventually you become hopefully better. And hopefully I have. But that's it. I've always had programming jobs in my career. Well, programming and research now. What is your current occupation? At which institute or company? Interested in research collaboration? Okay, I'm now officially a senior research scientist at Magic Leap, which is this AR company that does amazing AR glasses, and they have really cool technology. I can't tell exactly what I work on, but it's definitely a research topic and it's very interesting to me. As for research collaboration, we do have a collaboration with some institutions. I'd say at this point, we're still not at the point where I personally would collaborate research-wise with a lot of people outside of the company, but who knows, maybe at some point. Okay, can you give me some C++ side project ideas related to robotics and computer vision so I can practice my C++ skills? Well, basically, to be honest, it's up to you. Anything that you find interesting, that you think can be implemented in C++, you can implement in C++. You have to be interested in this in order to push through when the times get worse, like when you have these bugs and you have to debug your code multiple times and it just doesn't work out, because these times happen. So you really have to be interested in what you're doing. If we're talking related to robotics and computer vision, it again depends on which direction do you want to go. Do you want to go more in control? Do you want to go more into perception or mapping and localization? If you go in control, write a small PID controller for a robot that's running in some simulation environment. If you want to go more towards perception and mapping localization, again, feel free to use any of available simulation environments, something like Carla or things like that, to just get in the more or less realistic looking data and implement your own mapping. It's a complicated project when you're doing it the first time, but it's not really that hard when you've done it a couple of times. So eventually you will become better at this, and I find these projects to be interesting. Something along these lines. Don't know if I fully answered your question, but that's kind of what I have. And last question that I have in this list today is multi-threading ideas for implementing a simple SLAM pipeline in C++. Again, I don't fully know what you mean by this question, but there is a lot of parts of the whole process that you can parallelize. Let's start with the front end of how you detect stuff and how do you put it all into eventually an optimization problem that you want to solve. So when you do that, you're able then to, let's say we're working on a LiDAR SLAM pipeline. Then you will go through the environment, you will have the points and they will match to other points. These matchings can be done in a parallel way. So if you want to practice your parallel computing, that's a perfect scenario. If you are detecting any features in the environment, this also can be done in a parallel way. So there is plenty of opportunities to parallelize the solutions here. Once you have your optimization problem at the ready, you can, of course, write a parallel solver for this, because a lot of those problems are kind of sparse, and which goes a lot more into math, but you can parallelize, basically it's like a matrix, like linear matrix solver in a certain way. And that being said, if you're building the whole big SLAM system for huge maps, you will eventually have to deal with parts of the environment separately. And those can also be done in a parallel way. So pick your poison. You can pick the part which you want to parallelize and how big this parallelization should be. And you're basically on your own, you can pick the one that you like most. At least that's my understanding of your question, and that's as good of an answer that I can make for it. These seem to be all the questions that you got for me for this time. And I thank you a lot for this. I've never done this before. I've never had random people on the internet asking me questions about random stuff that I put up there. So thanks a lot for having really good questions and making this fun. Let's see where we get to do this the next time. And please continue engaging in these discussions and building around this community, and just write in the comments, in the descriptions. I will try to answer them to the degree of my ability. If I miss the comment, sometimes don't hesitate to just write another one and tell me like, hey, you missed this comment, because YouTube system doesn't really show comments that well and I might miss them, although I try not to. I'm really looking forward to our future discussions, and thanks a lot again for all of this. See you in the next one. Bye bye. Oh, and Merry Christmas. It's coming.